SADD Nation, and welcome to our penultimate webcast Wednesday. My name is Carrie Ferguson, and I am the Colorado State Coordinator for SADD. Today, we're excited to bring you another important message about occupant protection. And here to help make sure that we are up to speed on keeping our passengers safe is Amanda Abramczyk-Dill, Prevention and Education Outreach Coordinator with Community Health at the Children's Hospital of Colorado, and also the Director of Safe Kids Colorado. Welcome, Amanda. Thank you for being with us today.
Hi, Carrie. Thank you so much for having me. Hi, Carrie. Thank you so much for having me.
May we start by hearing a little bit about you and what it is you do?
Sure. As you mentioned, I work for Children's Hospital Colorado in Colorado Springs. I help to promote injury prevention through our hospital and out in the greater community. And I also do coordinate the Safe Kids Colorado Springs Coalition. So not everyone knows preventable injury is the leading cause of death and disability in children. So I work with community partners to help educate families and children on what the common causes of injury are and what ways they can help keep kids safe. So in our hospital, we see a lot of children injured in motor vehicle collisions. It's actually the second leading cause of trauma that we see. So I'm really happy to be able to talk with SADD today about this.
Thank you.
So I can start by talking about laws that are common in actually each state. So there's a group of laws called the Occupant Protection Laws. They cover topics like child restraints and seatbelt use. So regarding the younger population, for example, in Colorado, we have for 1-year-olds who weigh 20 pounds or less, they must ride rear facing and be in the back seat. For children 1 to 3 that weigh between 20 and 40 pounds, in a car seat. Children 4 to 7 that are over 40 pounds must be in a car seat or booster seat. And then children who are 8 to 15 must use a booster seat or a seat belt. So Colorado law is meant to keep kids safe. They're really good guidelines to follow. And there are additional best practices that even extend beyond the law that I'll cover today as well. So one thing about car seats is that if they're used correctly, they can really reduce the risk of injury in a crash by about 71 to 82%. So it's really great to talk about why they're so important and some of the ways to make sure your car seat's used correctly.
Hey, Amanda, I'm really excited to talk about this topic. It's something we haven't really covered much before. So can you tell us a little bit about what the different car seat options are and how they correspond to different ages? You know, when we know it's safe to move up to a new level of seats, how does all that work?
Sure. So for infants, you'll see what's called a rear facing only seat more often, or an infant carrier. And that fits about newborn to about 1 year of age. Then you also have a convertible seat. Those can be installed both rear and then later on forward facing once your child's ready for it. Rear facing can fit an infant per the upper weight limit of that car seat, which is typically 40 to 50 pounds. It's best to follow weight versus age, but that generally aligns with a 3 or 4 year old. And then when you switch to that forward facing positioning, that's typically between 40 and 65 pounds in general, which can be between 3 and 7 years old. Especially for those smaller children, sometimes an 8-year-old might be able to still stay in that forward facing if they're kind of lighter weight. And then of course we have high and low back booster seats. So those have a kind of an age range of 4 to 12. And typically they can be between 40 and 50 pounds as the lower weight, up to about 100 or even 110 pounds. There are some car seats that kind of incorporate all of those versions, the rear facing, forward facing, and then the booster position. They're called like a 3-in-1 or a 4-in-1, and those can help follow the child through those stages as well. Regarding moving up to the next level of seating, so its stage is safer than the next. So you want to keep them in that stage, in that rear facing, for example, positioning as long as possible. You just need to make sure you're following your car seat's height and weight limits. So keep your child in that car seat until they've reached that maximum height or weight, and then you can transition to the next stage.
Thank you. I think that's super important, and we don't often hear about keeping kids in car seats until they're about age 12, so that's good to know.
Absolutely. How do we know which seat is the right seat, besides some of the things that you talked about in regards to their weight, their height, things like that? Maybe talk a little bit, if you don't mind, about car seat expirations and things like that.
Sure. So yes, definitely height and weight is going to be your top, and then some seats do have certain age requirements. But yeah, there are other things that are important to keep in mind. So what's going to work for your vehicle? Which car is going to fit the way it's meant to in the car that you're driving? So you don't always want to buy a new car because the car seat doesn't work. So just making sure it's the right size and you can get a good fit is really important. Making sure your car seat isn't expired is essential. They're not guaranteed after that expiration. There's a reason, just like with anything else you buy, a safety item isn't guaranteed after that. So you don't want to risk that by keeping an expired seat installed because it might not function the way it's meant to. You want to make sure any seat you have doesn't have any outstanding recalls on it. Often a recall isn't that you need to replace the whole car seat. Often it's just a small piece. So once you get that registration card, it's important to fill out that information or go online and let them know you have this specific seat and model so that they can notify you if they found anything that should be replaced or fixed on it. One other note, it's important not to get car seats, like a used car seat, from a source you don't trust. So if you get one online or through some secondhand markets, we generally just don't recommend that. If you don't know the history, right? You don't know if it's been in a crash. You don't know if it's kind of been pieced together from other car seats. You want to keep everything with your car seat that it was actually created for that car seat, nothing that's been pulled from any other one or anything that's been added. So always check that. Also, if your car seat has been in a crash, even if it's been in a fender bender, check with your car seat manufacturer. They may allow you to keep using under certain guidelines, but they may also say, nope, you should replace this. We don't guarantee that the seat's going to continue to protect the child the way it should. And often auto insurance plans may help with that replacement. So always contact your manufacturer for any type of collision to see what that process is and see if it's the right thing to replace your car seat.
That's a lot of great information. Can you tell us where the safest place for kids to sit in a car is?
That is a great question, Michelle. So the safest place for any child to sit is in the back seat. The airbag in that front seat can travel up to 200 miles per hour or even more. And smaller bodies just can't take that force like a larger body can. So you really want to keep your child in the back seat until at least age 13 to make sure they're the safest possible.
That's great to know, Amanda. Can you tell us, car seats can be kind of cumbersome and difficult for parents to know if they're installing the seat properly. Are there places where parents can have the installation checked by technicians, law enforcement, or hospitals?
Sure. So a lot of fire departments or police departments have what are called car seat technicians. So their official name is child passenger safety technicians, and they've gone through a complete training to make sure they know about different car seats and different vehicles and different installation efforts and methods, and they can take a look. So obviously, when you're installing your vehicle or your car seat in your vehicle, check your manual for your car seat and your actual vehicle, because they have guidelines on how car seats can and can't be installed. So follow that, but it's always great to have a second pair of eyes that are trained, that have been involved in this and have had kind of a deeper education on car seats and some of the ins and outs of it, to make sure that your installation is correct. So you don't want your car seat, for example, to move more than an inch front to back or left to right at the belt path. Your harness straps, if you're rear facing, you want them to be at or below the child's shoulders. And then if your child's forward facing, you want them at or above. And then you want the seatbelt to fit them correctly and that booster to be appropriately guiding the seatbelt. So having that car seat tech take a look is really important. Another thing you can do is you can go online and find some manufacturers have created videos on proper installation. So you can look for those videos, make sure it's from the manufacturer so that all the information is correct. But you can watch those videos that can help guide you as well. And there are even manufacturers like Evenflow that offer appointments through virtual methods where they'll have a car seat technician go and you'll use an application, your mobile phone or another mobile device, and they can help guide you through it from your home to make sure that car seat's in correctly. So those are all really accessible options. If you're looking for a car seat technician, you can go to safekids.org/certification. And on that website, you click on Find a Tech. You'll be able to type in your state, your city, and your zip code to find a technician near you. And they'll have their contact information so you can reach out and see about scheduling that appointment. You can also visit in Colorado, we have Car Seats Colorado, and you can go to their website and they have inspection stations that are registered that have car seat technicians during certain hours. So you can reach out to them and find out when you can stop by to have your car seat installation checked.
Wow, that's a lot of information, and sounds like there's a lot of professionals out there to help us make sure they're installed correctly. But just to make sure I understood, seatbelt adjustment is really important for the car seats and booster seats?
Correct. So for installing car seats, you typically have two ways of doing it. You can use the latch system, which are lower anchors and tethers for children, or you can use the seat. So if you're using the seatbelt for a car seat installation, you want to make sure that that seatbelt is locked appropriately so you can get that tight fit so it doesn't move left and right or front and back. And then of course with boosters, you want to make sure the seatbelt's guiding along the booster correctly. That seatbelt, you want it to fall between the end of their shoulder and their neck so it's not pressing on their neck or falling off their shoulder. And that'll help guide it halfway through their chest so it's connecting with their sternum or the hardest part of their chest. And then also for the lap belt part of the seat belt, you want to make sure it's high on their thighs so that it's going to keep them safe in that crash. So checking all of that is really important. For booster seats as well, you may have like a high back booster seat, and that'll typically have a guide up here that you're going to slide that seatbelt through, and that'll make sure it's falling in the right location. But you also have those low back boosters that don't have the high back portion. So if you have a low back booster, they'll often have a little harness or a little strap connecting a little piece of plastic that's also its own guide. So you can run the seatbelt through that little piece of plastic or the guide behind the back of the child and tighten it enough so that the seatbelt also lays in the right position.
That's great to know. Thank you so much.
So we often talk with teenagers at SADD. That's a big piece of all of our work. And we're often talking about graduated driver's licenses. How does that work when we have a young driver behind the wheel with occupant protection and having younger children in the car?
That's a great question. And I'm really glad you brought up the role of younger drivers and earlier drivers in keeping occupants safe. So often the GDL process or program does limit the amount of passengers you can have. Sometimes you can't have any passengers under the age of 21. So you want to make sure that whatever your age requirements are for the GDL, that you're following it, and that parents are aware of that too, so that you don't expect your child to go and drop off the younger brother if they're actually not allowed to per GDL guidelines. Also for GDL, seatbelts are required for all occupants in Colorado. I'm sure it's pretty common in other states as well. So young drivers just have that responsibility to make sure everyone is buckled up. For example, if they're allowed to have their sibling in the car, and let's say they have a booster seat, well, it's that young driver's responsibility to check on that sibling, make sure they're buckled up the right way and that they stay buckled up. So I'm really glad you mentioned that.
Hello from Ohio. In addition to proper use of seatbelts and car seats, what are some of the other things that contribute to occupant protection?
There are a lot of other things. Great question. So parents and caregivers and really any driver play a really important role through setting that example. So what they're showing as a responsible driver, those kids are watching. So even the young ones. So it's really important that every driver is really being responsible and practicing safe driving and safe riding, right? So even if it's an adult in the passenger seat, it's important that they buckle up every time, or even an older teen. So making sure they ride safely, having them buckle up every time, they're not driving distracted, and ensuring that they're just setting that right example. So let's say they are driving somewhere they've never been before. So let's say they have to use a navigation system. Having a designated navigator or even a designated texter is really important, and that designated texter isn't trying to distract the driver with what they're doing, right? So being calm, being responsible is the role of everybody in the car, and teaching kids that as well, and how important it is for them not to distract the driver can make a big impact and help develop those habits and that responsibility feeling in them as well, no matter what their age is.
Awesome. At this time, if you have any questions for Amanda, go ahead and type them over in the chat. We have one so far. Amanda, you were talking about expiration dates for car seats. Where do you find that expiration date? How do you know if it's expired?
Great question. So expiration dates often are on the sticker on the bottom of the car seat. So it could either be underneath, or sometimes it's going to be on the side. And so you'll want to look at that sticker. It'll have like the model number, it'll have the manufacturer date, and sometimes it'll have the expiration date. However, if it's not found on there, often your manual will have that in it as well. So you can check to see. Car seats vary in how long they're manufactured to last or be used till. They can range from about 6 years to up to 10. So those 3-in-1s and 4-in-1s that I mentioned, because they're intended to follow through all the stages of a child and their car seat needs, those often last about 10 years. So it really can vary, and checking that information is helpful. Sometimes the model number you can check online, or even call the manufacturer. If you don't have that sticker any longer, or if you can't find the manual, you can reach out to them too, and they'll be able to provide you with the expiration date, so you know how much longer you can use your seat for. Seats. Oh,
awesome. Sorry, go ahead. I was just going to say, Lauren was asking, what do we do with expired seats or seats that have been in a crash? Are we recycling? Where do they go?
Sure. So because a seat, especially if the manufacturer says don't use the seat any longer, it's important that no one else uses that either, right? So you don't want to just set it out on the curb and have someone pick it up and then they're using a seat that actually isn't going to protect them the way it should. So you want to cut actually the straps of your car seat. That way the harness won't even be able to work anymore. And then for us in Colorado, our Colorado State Patrol is great with this. They have a Connex at one of their locations here. And you can call them, you can drop it off in the Connex, and they'll take care of the recycling step. So reach out to your state patrol or even a local police department or fire department. They may know what recycling looks like for your area. But that's a really great question. I'm glad you mentioned it.
Hey, Amanda, I do have a question. I am, when we used to do an elementary passenger safety program here in Louisiana, a lot of kids that were in, 3rd, 4th, sometimes 5th grade should be in booster seats. And they really did not want to hear that news that we had to deliver to them to let them know that they were not riding in a safe seat. And they really, just can't wear the seatbelt the proper way. So I'm interested, to learn from you as far as like, what advice do you give kids when you have to how do you deliver that message? I mean, what is your experience in that?
It is really challenging. You have children that want to have a sense of more grown up, right? They don't want to feel like a little kid. They don't want to feel like that's impacting their sense of independence and their ability to either make decisions or feel like they don't need what they might consider like a baby seat. It's important to just talk with them and say, hey, this is really important. There are even some videos online that show the importance of booster seats, and those are a really good visual representation that can kind of speak to those ages. And of course, they're simulated, they're videos, so checking them first and making sure it's appropriate for your child is important. But really walking them through that and saying like, hey, you know, this is why it's important. We know maybe you don't want to wear this or use this booster seat. Maybe you feel a little too old for it, but what's really important is your safety. So if you're in a crash and you're sitting like this and you can show them the video and say, this is how that crash really impacts you. And they happen so quickly at such a high velocity, you have no control. No one has control. Your body's going to move the way physics tell it to. And so showing them that that's how it would be versus with a booster, how much more it protects them and keeps them in the place it's supposed to, can really help speak to them and talk them through that and say, you know, I understand you don't want to use this, but this is also your responsibility. You know, I don't want to lose you, or your parents don't want to lose you because of this small step. So it's really important to promote that amongst them, and of course talk about potentially any friends that they have that also use their booster seats to say, hey, this is a normal thing. This is something that other people your age also practice, and just having that be promoted through other parents and as well through their kids can help it be kind of that social norm for them to feel like, okay, yeah, I don't love it. Or maybe they actually do love it because they realize that the seatbelt's fitting them correctly, and walking them through that difference too can help show, okay, yes, you're right, it is more comfortable. Those are some approaches that you can use to help promote that or I guess approach that resistance that you might have once in a while.
Hey, Amanda, I know I'm going to get flack for this one, but I have to ask it. So very often we see that parents put a whole bunch of dangly things or a whole bunch of stuff for our babies and infants to play with on our car seats, or they'll put a sheet over the baby. Is that okay? Is that something we should be doing, or should we be doing something else?
I'm glad you mentioned that. So that's something actually we see often in our car seat checks as well. So you'll have that infant carrier handle with a cute little toy, or you'll have a nice little insert that looks like a panda bear, but it didn't actually come with the car seat. So we do advise parents that those things they're not often crash tested. So those things are sold on the market and they may have a label that says safety tested, but it does not mean they've actually been tested with this specific car seat in a crash to make sure they aren't actually impeding or altering how that car seat's actually protecting the child. So we advise parents not to add anything to the car seat that didn't actually come with the car seat. There's some exceptions where a manufacturer created something and also crash tested it. So not all things created by, let's say, Evenflow might have been crash tested, but some things may have. So there are further things that the manufacturer will give you details on, to say, yes, this is approved for this seat, this seat, this seat, and this seat. But I'm glad you mentioned that. So the main risk with those things are some things can actually be suffocation hazards. So a child can move their head off to the side depending on their age. And actually it's not been tested that at that angle in that car seat that's actually safe for them. Another thing is crashes happen so quickly, so fast that little cute dangly toy actually becomes a projectile and it flings off and it causes additional injury to the child. That actually extends to things that are around the seating area for that child. So if you have like a shade coming down on the window, something that's attached, or even those rear facing, those mirrors that help you see in your rear view mirror and help you see the infant's face. And you know, those aren't advised because they can become a projectile. Again, it's up to the parent if they decide to continue using those, but it's important to talk about the risks because there are risks related to adding things to their seating area. And maybe you just hit your brake slightly, but that mirror flew off and hit your child and caused them to get cut or cause additional injury that otherwise, if it wasn't there, they wouldn't have that injury. Another thing specifically with the mirrors that's important to talk about too, is if you're looking in your rearview mirror at your child, you're actually more distracted. So it's pulling your attention away from your responsibility of driving and going along the road. And maybe that split second that you look up and laugh at your infant or check to make sure they're okay actually causes a crash and then leads you all in potentially to get injured. So it's really important to really think through those things before making that decision.
Well, I'm learning that my children probably are just lucky to be alive. Amanda, you were talking about expiration dates again and recycling. Is it okay if your car seat is rated or has a 10-year lifespan? Is it all right to recycle within your own family? Let's say no crashes, that sort of thing. And, I have a 3-year-old ready to, move up to a different, maybe a slightly larger car seat or whatnot. Can I recycle that other one and for my 1-year-old or whatever?
Sure. So what I mentioned earlier is secondhand seats aren't advised from untrusted sources, right? So going online and buying one from any of those media markets, or going and just even getting a free one from someone who's posted it is not advised because you don't know that person, right? You're not sure if that seat has actually been in a crash or not, or if the information you're getting is accurate. So it's okay to get one from a trusted source. And I would consider that passing it to a close family member or a close friend where they know that you're being truthful and then you obviously know you're being truthful is okay. Just making sure any of those recalls and any of the collision guidelines, even if you were an offender bender, were followed before passing that seat on is what you want to follow. So good question.
Awesome. Well, I think we've run through everybody unless anybody else has a question for Miss Amanda. All right. Well,
can I just add?
Thank you so much, Amanda, for being with us today. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Sure. So I just want to stress that rear facing is the safest. So keep your child rear facing as long as possible, even if your convertible seat, for example, allows you to transition to forward facing earlier, or those weights overlap. Make sure you keep them rear facing as long as possible. Their head is just a lot heavier, and it'll help protect their head and their neck. If their legs are growing, you're not as concerned. There's real added concern for a leg injury, even if their legs they look cramped. They're so much more flexible than us. Yeah, we couldn't sit like that, but they can. They're children. They're good. So don't be as concerned about their legs. Just really know rear facing helps protect their head and neck a lot more, and that's what you're really concerned about in those crashes. And then keep note of recline angle. So infant seats and even convertible seats have what's called a recline angle to make sure your child's airway is staying open because they can't hold their head up all the way. So make sure you're following those guidelines as well.
I think Carrie might be frozen.
Awesome.
Oh, no, we found her.
Am I still frozen?
No, you're good now.
I was just holding really still. Ha, fooled you all. All right. Amanda, thank you so much for being with us today. We sure appreciate you. Restraints are such an important part of being safer inside moving vehicles. So thanks for helping to provide this information on using our equipment properly.
Of course, it was my pleasure. Thank you, SADD, for having me today. I hope everyone learned a little bit today, and it was a pleasure. I hope you all take care.
Thank you. Also, Amanda has some great video resources that we are going to post in our chats when we post this video. So, and also some things in Spanish if you are a English as a second language type person who needs that information or wants to pass that information on. So next week, we'll see you for our very last webcast Wednesday for our Super Safe Summer campaign. And join us and tell us about your why. Why are you doing safety and proactive SADD type work? So until then, everybody, safe travels. Thanks so much.